Hi guys, what's up? Something weird happened in Ukraine that I think is quite interesting to talk about. So if you really like the content that you're going to see, remember to like, subscribe and share the video and cue the video.
Well, guys, there's a couple of clips going viral from news coverage of the war in Ukraine. And the reason so many people, I think, are watching and reacting to them is because they really seem to give up the game on something really central to the media's coverage of Ukraine. Namely, why are they so deeply concerned for the victims of this particular crisis, in contrast to the indifference or outright contempt displayed for the victims of any myriad of other crises around the world? Let's take a look.
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
I mean, what I can say is define civilized. What does civilized mean? Civilized, at an advanced stage of social and cultural development. Polite and well-mannered. So you're telling me that that doesn't happen in other places like Libya, Afghanistan? People are more aggressive. That doesn't mean they're not civilized. They just see things different. I don't know. It's like, am I the only one that find this weird? By your definition, I come from a third world country. By your definition, Europe is the only civilized one which is asking help from a civilized country like US. By your definition, what US is doing is civilized, but what Russia is doing is third world country. Just because something is not familiar to you, that doesn't mean it's not civilized. I've been caught in that situation that I thought I'm better than another person, only to realize that we're all the same. The only thing is what I consider not civilized by my standard in their view or my view, they just did it better than me. But I just didn't appreciate it until I learned. But the fact that the media pushes that out there, it does makes me think you know what? I don't want to watch this anymore because that's kind of biased. And you have to express it in a non-biased way. It does remind me, for example, Holland has an island, the island that I'm coming from, Curacao, right? And I always thought, why is Curacao, which is in front of South America, belong to Holland? Only for me to realize, right below us, we have a lot of oil. Everybody wants our oil. Venezuela wants our oil. People in Venezuela were saying back in the day, this island is ours. People in Venezuela were saying 15 kilometers from our border, normally it's 3, but they say 15, so the oil there below is ours. Okay, Holland says, if you touch us, Europe is gonna touch you. So you see, there's always a reason. I don't think people want to fight Russia for whatever reason. No, everybody wants all the materials in Ukraine. Everybody wants that gas in Ukraine. Russia's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Germany depends 70% on my gas and I'm gonna give that away? Ukraine is gonna go to the NATO? No. You see, there's always an incentive. What surprises me that people can be so sympathetic when USA is one of the government that did one of the most gangster stuff that you can find documented, like killing leaders, putting the one that we agree with, the this and that, bada bing, bada boom. But whenever another country creates a game about them, they are the good guys, and they shoot American people, oh my God, what the heck, they want to go to war. I'm like, whoa, we're making games of killing everybody, even yourself. But when somebody makes a game about killing you, oh my God, that's bad. So it's either left or right. And if it's not, it's about the leader that you kind of like in that country. There's always a narrative. So you have to be very careful. Look at this.
Me, I'm sorry. It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes, and blonde hair being killed. Children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
So it hurts your feeling because they look like you. Really? What about me? Growing up, seeing all the immigrants like me getting mistreated, like me, that I actually have to talk in a certain way like white people so you feel comfortable so I can belong or be symbiotic with you. I'm the good one. I don't know, man. When you talk like that, there comes a point I'm like, you know what? I don't really want to cover this. But when you label it like that, like, oh, people that look like me are getting hurt, I'm like, nah. You can't say that. I have to call you out.
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
This is Europe? I don't think they belong to Europe yet. I mean, Ukraine is very developed? I think they're one of the poorest of the poorest. What are you talking about? The only thing I think they want to go to NATO because they have the most prized possession that Russia wants. So you think, oh, you want to join me? Oh man, that proves our point. Yeah. Come on, man. Not everybody is that blind though. I actually think Ukraine is even poorer than specific countries in Africa. I'm not even joking. Yes, they have a lot of minerals, but Africa does have a lot too. You're civilized, but GDP-wise, you're not civilized at the other third world countries sometimes.
This is Europe. Civilized. Blonde-haired, blue eyes. In case you didn't get it, not in the Telegraph wants to make it even more clear for you, writing, quote, "They seem so like us. That is what makes it so shocking. Ukraine is a European country. Its people watch Netflix and have Instagram accounts, vote in free elections, and have uncensored newspapers. War is no longer something visited upon impoverished and remote populations. It can happen to anyone." All just seemingly a bunch of different ways of trying to say, oh my God, they're killing white people. Now, these reporters and analysts clearly expect that the white American and European majorities will care more about the humanity of these particular victims because we share similar levels of melanin. And that is certainly part of what's going on here. After all, you do see some countries right now opening their arms to the white refugees of the Ukraine war while closing their doors to those from Africa and the Middle East.
So now the African part is coming in. Ukraine, you're not allowed to leave if you're 16 or 60. You have to fight the war for some odd reason. What I didn't understand though is that when I saw this happening, I was like, wait, I see a baby crying. Students cannot leave. Why cannot students leave? Somebody who came to your country to study. Why are they not allowed to leave? That doesn't make any sense. Poland isn't the one blocking them. It's Ukrainians people blocking them. Like, you know what? All these seats, all these trains, we want to save the people that are going to come back to our beautiful country. You're not coming back to our beautiful country. So when you're not taking the seat to leave our country, are you guys racist? What's happening over here?
There was someone who I was talking to here earlier who tried to get on the train and wasn't allowed to get on the train.
They are only allowing, they are not allowing the blacks to get on board. So if you're black and then you go there, you're wasting your time. So we didn't even bother ourselves. We just went to pick a bus and then headed to this place.
Yeah, because usually there were black people that were already there that were turning around, looking for the borders and other routes because they stood there for a long time and they were not getting on the train because they were stopping them. So they were warning us not to even try to go there because they will not allow us. That is why we didn't go for the train and try to find another route.
And how does that make you feel to hear things like that?
I don't know. It's just...
A black woman is seen being denied boarding onto a train believed to be evacuating civilians in Ukraine away from the advance of Russia from the east. No verbal reason is given for the denial, but moments later, a white woman is allowed to board the same train.
And the issue isn't with the Polish people. They seems to be quite chill about the whole situation. They receive them with open arms, Warsaw and everything. So it seems it's coming from the Ukrainians. I'm surprised though that they're like, you know what, don't take the train. These are for Ukrainians. You can just walk. And the only reason I'm officially covering this, I don't want to talk about this Ukraine thing because I made a video before. It's confusing. One people says one thing, the other says one thing, flick flop, both are right, both are wrong, and I'm like, okay, this is more like watching Netflix from the bad side or the good side. Nobody's right. Because the thing about this is, it reminds me when certain people that are civilized treat me a certain way, but when you react or things become gangster or whatever, everybody becomes very tribal, very gangster, and suddenly it's like, yo man, you stay behind. I know that I have to speak a certain way. I know I have to smile a certain way. I know I have to look a certain way to get certain access. Because hey, you are more comfortable with people that look like you. And some people are like, yes, I agree with that. I get where you're coming from. But when war is the reason you're going to access that power, you become a gangster person. And that's dangerous. I don't like that. And when people try to cover to keep that image, then I'm like, nah, bruh. You have no idea what you're talking about. The fact that you said people with blue eyes, they're getting massacred.
This is Europe.
Oh my God, my heart is hurt. What do you mean? What about the mom with the baby? Wah, wah, wah. Well,
This is Europe.
everybody loves you a lot until they have to love themselves more, which is normal. I get it, but don't say all lives matter. I mean, think about it. If Africans came there to study because maybe they didn't have any opportunity, you're like, yes, come here, pay your money, bada bing, bada boom, we will help you. But when things got real, you're like, Russia is messing up. Well, we have to save the people. Even if you give your men money already here, use it to build the train so my people can escape, and you just try to survive. And if you survive, or maybe even fight for us in our army, hey man, maybe it will be a beautiful country in the future. Right? I'm even surprised that when you go to the border of Ukraine, they even block you there. I'm like, well, what do you got to lose? Why would you not even let them get out of Ukraine? This only proves that when people say they only care if it gives them moral points. That's why this news political system, I can see how it affects the mind of people, but I'm always consistent knowing what can happen when shits hit the fan. But I know how to handle that. I know how to talk. I know how to get exception because I've been born like this. I've survived like this, and I know what I have to do. And for my kids, I'll do it forever because no, I'm not gonna make them fall in a pit just because of my skin color, and I could not strategize a good solution for that whole situation. But hey, it is what it is. But now that I'm seeing it, I'm not surprised. So when people are like, are you going to be sympathetic for the people? What do you mean sympathetic? Of course I'm sympathetic for these African people. But we've been telling you this for so long. There comes a point you get so desensitized when people say I'm doing it for the moral points, because I know when shit hits the fan, you're not a good fan anymore.
Easier to otherize people who don't look like you or have different cultural practices or traditions or religions. But melanin solidarity is not actually the real story here. Playing to a shared racial and cultural identity, it's really just a tool. It's a means to an end that the news media is using to persuade Americans that they should care more about the people in this conflict than in any number of other conflicts that they are not covering whatsoever. This is a classic case of the phenomenon Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman describe in Manufacturing Consent, how the media picks worthy and unworthy victims, choosing which stories, protests, wars, famines are worthy of coverage and worthy of displaying the humanity of the people impacted, and which should either be ignored completely or actively demonized. And the deciding factor here is not actually race or culture or which continent the events happen to be unfolding on. The deciding factor is which narratives are most convenient for the U.S. government. Just ask yourself this question. Why was it that for decades of the Afghan war, the Afghan civilians killed by the U.S. state were considered unworthy victims? Then, for a brief period during our withdrawal from Afghanistan, suddenly Afghan civilians were worthy victims. And then the news media cared deeply about the fate of the women and girls who would live under Taliban rule. Then, just as suddenly, now that there is a mass famine caused by our own cruel theft of the Afghan government funds, Afghan civilians are once again unworthy victims. The ethnicity, cultural practices, and level of development of the country did not change. What changed was which narrative was convenient for our state. In fact, within the very same country, at the very same time, some victims were deemed worthy and covered as such, but by the media, while others were not. So victims of American drone strikes, unworthy. The Afghan girls robotics team, worthy. All because of what the U.S. state wanted highlighted and what they wanted suppressed. It's disgraceful how the corporate news media is happy to manipulate Americans' most noble humanitarian impulses and channel them in directions that are convenient for U.S. power. And you can see this dynamic playing out right now all over the world. In our own country, within liberal media, COVID victims have frequently been given worthy treatment, while victims of drug overdoses have been given unworthy treatment. Looking around the world, Cuban protesters and Hong Kong protesters were given worthy treatment since they were opposing governments that our elites don't like. Chilean protesters and Palestinian protesters were given the unworthy treatment because the U.S. state did not care for their causes. Perhaps the most glaring discrepancy right now is between the way that the Ukrainian war is being covered and the way that the Saudi war in Yemen is being ignored. In Yemen, the U.S. has been backing our ally Saudi Arabia in a proxy war that has left the Yemeni population starving and completely desperate. In fact, Yemen is currently considered to be the world's worst humanitarian crisis, with millions of children in danger of starving to death. But since the U.S. is complicit in causing this particular war and its attendant mass suffering, you don't hear a whole lot about it. On the contrary, for all the flaws of the media's coverage of the Ukraine conflict, and there are many, they have gone out of their way to treat the people suffering there with humanity. I've watched beautiful videos and read heart-wrenching stories about refugees grabbing what they can and fleeing by the hundreds of thousands, about families hunkered down in parking garages, terrified for their lives and the lives of their children, about young men suddenly thrust in the middle of a war with a hastily issued government weapon and zero training. The play to tribalism. These blonde-haired people are just like you. They watch Netflix. That is a technique used in the manipulation, an effective manipulation because, yes, of very real problems of racism and tribalism, but it's not actually the root cause of that manipulation. The reason they want you to see these victims as the fully worthy human beings that they are is because they're opposing one of our most significant global adversaries. Now, some make the opposite mistake of thinking that since the Ukrainian suffering is convenient for the U.S. state, that we should not care about it whatsoever. So let me be totally clear. What's being done to Ukraine by Russia is horrible, and it is heartbreaking, and it deserves to be covered with humanity. I don't want the coverage of Ukraine to have less care and empathy. I want all wars to be given this same treatment. This is also not a call to stop covering the conflict. I believe the stakes for the world of what happens in Ukraine, as we've been laying out here today, are very, very high. We are witnessing a global great power realignment in real time, which will shape our world for decades to come. We are also watching in real time as the worst voices in American politics try to draw us into a war with a nuclear power. Those are serious, consequential topics with global implications, and they deserve thorough consideration. But when the media tries to convince you of the righteousness of a particular cause because of the humanitarian considerations, just remember all of the millions of humanitarian considerations that they care absolutely nothing about.
Yeah, very well said. I couldn't have said it any better. And not that I don't want to cover it, but it is so much information. And you just get tired. You get desensitized because even if you cover it, you want to help. But how they help is not the way you would want to help. The problem is when you remove the power, a different power appears. Or if you put your own power, your own power gets corrupt. And it's getting worse. Look.
Your dialect, it looks like the Russian. Are you from Russia?
Yes, from Russia, Russian member.
Ясно, экипаж России, да? Ребята, мы отказываемся от бункеровки, мы отказываемся снабжать ваш пароход.
Кто с вами говорит?
С вами говорит старший помощник капитана с Грузии. Мы не будем снабжать ваш пароход. Русский корабль, иди нахуй.
Оккупанты, бля! Уважаемые, давайте без политики, у нас топливо заканчивается.
Ну, если у вас топливо заканчивается, вы можете использовать
Весла, бля, пошли вы нахуй!
Слава героям! Слава Украине! Героям слава!
It's infecting everything. Everybody is jumping on it. Blame, 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 blame. Why do I want to cover this? I'm not entertained by this. I just want it to stop, but it's not gonna stop. People are not good when shit hits the fan. Be careful. And Africans, Ukrainians, Russian, think a little more. Because not everybody is nice. So start having a plan B, C, D. Because war sucks. It sucks a lot.
Don't get me wrong, makosa kita bong.